Protests in Belarus over the presidential election have turned ugly, with two candidates among those hurt in clashes with police. Tens of thousands of people flocked to the central square of Minsk, demonstrating an apparent landslide victory for President Alexander Lukashenko. Two members of an RT camera crew have been hurt. Well, let's now go live to Katerina Zareva, who's in the centre of all the action there. Now, Katerina, there are reports, as we're saying, of protests turning violent near the government building. Tell us what's happening where you are.
At the moment, Bill, everything is quiet. That's because riot police just basically cleared out the thousands of people that were gathered here just outside the government building, where just moments before they were breaking down doors. As you can see behind me, riot police are now walking back to hold their positions surrounding the government building, where protesters were earlier breaking down doors and windows. Our crew actually got injured in the process while filming in the crowd right by the windows. Riot police started pushing everyone back, and two of my cameramen actually got hit on the head with police batons. They were able to continue their work. They're feeling all right, but it was still quite a sight. It seemed for a moment that police didn't really distinguish between civilians, journalists, anybody that was in the crowd risked getting hit or kicked or punched. And only later did they seem to kind of distinguish between journalists and protesters and actually try to avoid the press. We saw some protesters being cornered by riot police and beaten quite severely. It was quite a frightening sight. But right now it does seem that everything has calmed down. Riot police have gained control of the square, have cleared out all of the protesters. There are still some groups about, but they're very small, a few people in each one, and they're very quickly cornered by riot police, detained and moved off to waiting police cars. We saw a lot of people being detained, a lot of people injured as well in the protests that turned violent in a matter of moments, but have just as quickly been extinguished by officials.
We're here to defend our freedom, which is being threatened by one man who's in power and who's making all the decisions by himself. The entire system is riddled with fear. We've just seen one of the presidential candidates, Vladimir Neklyaev, beaten brutally. Flares went off, everyone was put down on the ground and told to stay down. We heard the attackers swearing. They broke the glass in our booth and began stealing our equipment like thieves. All the people were kicked out. Some of us regrouped and came here to protest.
So, of course, many people showing the will to protest, and that's exactly why they gathered outside the government building in Independence Square in the heart of the Belarusian capital, Minsk. But their protest, despite being a heartfelt one, was not a very prolonged one, quickly dispersed by riot police.
Well, Katerina, Alexander Lukashenko reportedly received almost 80% of the vote. So you've been talking about the domestic reaction there. What are the international observers saying about this overwhelming victory?
It is indeed apparently a landslide for Alexander Lukashenko, or the last dictator of Europe, as he has become known in some Western media. Famously, former U.S. former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice dubbed him that. He has apparently enjoyed a fourth consecutive win in a presidential election, the only presidential elections that Belarus has had, of course, four, all of them won by incumbent President Alexander Lukashenko. According to opposition leaders, these results are falsified, and the over 80% that Lukashenko has seemingly gathered, according to exit polls, is also a falsified number. That's precisely why they were out in the streets. So far, international observers haven't reported any major violations. We've only heard of one registered report where an international observer was denied access to a polling station, but so far that is the only report on record, and we are, of course, waiting to see whether international observers will bring forth a more detailed report of their observations. The money incentive in they're having a positive conclusion is a very big one. The European Union has promised Belarus a lot of financial aid, billions of euros, if there is evidence of free and democratic elections. Perhaps that is why Alexander Lukashenko allowed the opposition some semblance of freedom, giving them on-air time and sanctioned anti-government rallies. But critics, of course, say that that is all for show. International observers are still to publish their reports, and we'll, of course, update you when we get them.
Katerina, thanks very much indeed for that. Katerina Zareva, bring us the latest on the aftermath of the presidential election there in Belarus.